welcome back to the Basement Gun Shop. So, somebody suggested on a comment on a previous video about doing a Basement Gun Shop episode on tips for first-time buyers. So, I asked a good friend of mine, Brett, who worked in my favorite local gun shop, to come by because I know first time from the other side of the counter. He knows it from the salesman's part. So, Brett, Basement Gun Shop, here we go.
Hey,
So go ahead.
Hey everybody, just some basic things that I thought might be helpful if you're getting into a gun shop for the first time. One of the big things that people really don't think about when they're coming into a shop to buy their first gun is why they want it. People have an idea that they want it for protection, and sometimes they're a little bit shy about saying that. They'll come into the shop and I'd ask them, well, what are you looking for a gun for? And they sort of wanted to default to say something like, just practice, target shooting, whatever. And that's fine if that's what you want it for, but if you are looking for something primarily for home defense or something to carry, don't be shy about it. We own guns.
Yeah.
We carry them every day. That's what they're there for. So don't be hesitant to be honest about what that's there for. It's going to make a big difference in what I recommend to the first-time buyer, because different guns have different purposes. Big time.
Absolutely. You know, you could get a Ruger 22 that has an 8-inch bull barrel with adjustable sights and all these big sights and stuff on it, and you're going to go out and you're going to punch little holes in targets at 25 yards in a group this big, but somebody's coming in your house, that 8-inch bull barrel on that Ruger 22 isn't going to work as well as something as, say, like the Smith & Wesson 22 that's more along the size of their M&Ps.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is caliber. You know, if you're looking for target shooting and you want extreme accuracy in target shooting, you're going to go with something, again, like one of the Ruger 22s or a smaller caliber pistol. You're not going to be looking for 9mm, 357 SIG, 40 Smith & Wesson, 10mm 45, something like that.
Right, that's a huge difference. Generally, the nice rule of thumb as far as something for carrier home defense is you want to go with the largest caliber that you're comfortable with. It gives you the most stopping power and essentially the most bang for your buck in terms of protecting yourself, your home, your family, things like that. If you're telling me you want something for target shooting, I'm going to point you probably towards, like Jim said, a 22, which is a phenomenal way to learn the basics of shooting. Just the basics of how the gun functions as far as how to line up your sights, different things like that, that will get you into the field, but different purposes for different guns.
And the other thing is, one thing I want to say, that if you're willing to spend the extra money to buy that 22 to learn the basics, learn good sight picture, sight alignment, trigger control, grip stance, you know, and the whole laundry list of the basics, okay, fine. But you know, you're looking at anywhere from $350 to several $100 for a target grade 22. Like, you get some of the Anschutz, they're like $1,500 for a pistol with a grip that's custom made to you and all that. And it's not necessary if you're willing. But if you are willing to spend the money to buy this 22 and then come back after you've learned all the other stuff and buy this Glock or Smith & Wesson or H&K, whatever, for defending yourself or for personal carry, then that's fine, but there's no reason you need to do that. Go ahead.
One note about guns is that they're a little bit different than a lot of other items that you buy. The best way to think about it is that they're very similar to cars. Once you drive off the lot, or once you leave the shop with a gun, that is now a used car, a used gun. You're not going to be able to return it for the same price that you bought it for. You got to feel comfortable and confident in the gun you're buying. You're going to take a big hit financially if you have to sell it back. If you're buying a Glock for $5.5, if that goes back to the shop, they're going to have to resell it as a used gun, meaning it's going to have to be $75, $100 cheaper than a new one. They have to make a profit on that gun, so it's going to have to be $50, $75 lower than what they're going to be selling it for. So right off the bat, you're looking at $150, $200 in a loss if you're not sure about what you're buying and you make a rash, hasty decision. Don't do that. Take your time. feel confident in the gun, make sure it fits your hand, and make sure it's along the lines of what you're looking for.
And don't be afraid to ask to see all the different guns. If you want a 9mm, you got your heart set on a 9mm, look at the Glock, look at the Smiths, look at the Springfields, look at the H&Ks, look at all the 9mm they have in the shop. Ask the questions. Make an informed, get the information so you can make an informed decision. And if you're feeling rushed by the person behind the counter,
Yeah, time to go.
time to go.
Don't give somebody the time of day and your hard-earned money if they're not willing to spend their time. That's what they're for. We've had new customers at the shop that I worked at who would come in. Generally, you get one or two, maybe a week. In 2013, when things were going haywire in the gun industry, because of the rush on, fear of legislation that would block things, we were getting new customers multiple times a day. We still took the time to make sure we can explain everything about this gun, this gun, this gun. When you come in, I'm going to ask you a few different qualifying questions as far as what you're looking for, what your experience is. And then from what I glean from all of your information, I'm going to come up with 2, 3, maybe even 5 different guns that would fit what you're looking for. And I'll get every single one out of the counter. Different shops have some different policies. One shop might only let you get one at a time to look at, just as a sort of security thing. If I were to get pulled away on a phone call or something, I don't want to have 6 guns sitting on the counter. I'd rather have one, and I can say, hey, other person, I got a gun out here, keep an eye on it. But barring that, I will take the time to take one out, put it back. Another one out, put it back. 10 times. If you want to see that same one again, great. I'll get that out for you again. If you want to see 2 of them to compare, no problem. The big thing is that, like I said, it's not returnable. I don't just want to sell you a gun. I want to sell you the right gun for you because I want to make a customer. I don't want to make a sale. I want to make a customer who will come back, feel comfortable to ask questions, come back for their ammo, come back for their holsters. That's what customer service is all about, even in the gun industry.
In point of fact, I've been dealing with the same shop for better than 20 years. It's the only place I buy a gun at, unless I find one used at a really, really good price and in really good shape. I go to my local shop where Brett used to work, and it's not because he worked there, it's because I've known the owner since I was 11 or 12, and I went to school with his oldest son. So that never hurts. That kind of reputation, that never hurts. There's also, excuse me, something I've noticed when I get people who are thinking about buying guns. As an instructor, when I get people who are thinking about buying guns, they show up with a preconceived notion that they want a revolver. And I'm not a revolver guy. I have never professed to be a revolver guy, even though I do own several. But one thing you got to understand, revolver versus autoloader, is reloads are a lot slower, and your ammunition content or capacity is limited.
Very much.
I mean, you can find an 8-shot 357. They're few and far between nowadays. And a speed loader for a revolver, unless you're Jerry Michalek, there's no such thing as a speed loader. I mean, the guy's it's like he throws them in there, but
He's superhuman.
yeah, just watch, just do a YouTube search, Michalek world record. The guy dumps
Right up there in the search bar.
yeah, what he did right up there in the search bar. Michalek, M-I-C-U-L-E-K, world record. He, with the 357, 6 rounds, reload, 6 rounds, 2.99 seconds. That's not, he reloads the revolver faster than I shoot it. So that's something else you want to keep in mind. Autoloaders like a Glock 17 holds 17 rounds of 9mm. If my math is correct, because I haven't been drinking that much, if my math is correct, that's 11 rounds more than a revolver.
Yeah, if you keep one in the pipe and a fully loaded magazine, now you have essentially 3 loaded revolvers.
Yeah.
Which is
3
a big
loaded
difference.
revolvers versus 6 rounds. So that's something else. I find a lot of people coming to me. I just did a class for a guy I work with in my real job and his whole family. His mom showed up wanting a revolver. He texted me yesterday that she's the proud owner of a Springfield XDS.
Yeah.
So she shot my little XDS and she loved it. She did shoot the revolvers. She didn't like them that much. The other thing is, you want a revolver, you're going to have to deal with more felt recoil than you are with an autoloader.
Most definitely.
Because you don't have the slide taking up that energy. So that's something else to consider.
And generally, your trigger pull is also going to be a big factor because your defense revolvers are typically going to be a double action, single action. It's going to be a lot heavier than a short trigger pull and a generally around 4 or 5 pound trigger on a Glock or a Springfield, something like that. Now, it's not saying that revolvers aren't great, semi-autos are great. It just depends what works for you. One thing that you'll see on occasion with gun shops or at gun shows, if you have somebody new to shooting, and very often we'll find females coming in who are first-time shooters, you will see the gun salesman who will definitely try to herd them towards the revolvers because of how simple they are to operate. I don't want to knock revolvers. They're a great option if that's what you're comfortable with. But if you go into a shop and they're just completely dismissing the idea of you having anything but a revolver, time to go. You know, let them see you gotta let the customer see everything that's there. Guns aren't these mystical, phenomenal thing that you have to spend years and years and years to understand how to work it. You know, becoming a master shooter like Jerry Miculek or something, yeah, that'll take 1,000 years. Or, in my case, never, because that's not going to happen. But the basics of a semi-auto pistol, like a Glock or a Smith & Wesson M&P, I could, stand there in the shop for about half an hour and have you completely comfortable with everything that needs to be done to strip it down and clean it, to clear jams, to load it, and just generally operate it. They're not incredibly complex. They're rather simple. And it's intimidating to people who have never done it before, just like anything really is, whether you're working on installing a home stereo or whatever example you want to give. Don't feel that I have to go with the simplest option because I don't know anything about it. Go with what feels good in your hands. Go with what you think is going to work for you.
But don't get overzealous. Don't go in and buy a .44 Magnum for your first gun. I've known some people who have actually done that. And they took it out, they put 2 rounds through it, and they brought it back to the shop and took a $200 bath on the price of the gun. So keep in mind, common sense. Go in with an open mind. Find a store that will work with you. That's the biggest thing. Something else I know Brett wanted to hit on was gun safety in the shop.
Yep, etiquette is a big thing in gun shops. Everybody's heard the expression, the customer's always right. When it comes to safety,
No,
you're not. One of the big things that I've had a lot is I'll hand a customer a gun, they'll pull it and be pointing it right at me.
no.
Yes.
No one ever wants to be on the business end of this. I don't care if it's unloaded. I don't care if the slide's locked back.
I don't care if the slide's off the gun and you're pointing an empty frame at me. It's...
No one wants to be looking at this hole right here, especially another customer. Because there are times I've gone into a shop and I've walked in the door and there's somebody standing up at the other end of the shop like this.
Happens too often.
This never points at another person or anything that you are not willing to destroy.
Generally, they'll be forgiving about it the first time. Generally, they'll be a little more stern and a little more strict when telling you the second time, hey, you're pointing the gun at people. We don't do that. If it happens again, generally, you're going to be asked to leave. If you can't, understand that one basic rule that you don't point a gun at somebody unless they're trying to do you harm and you have to defend yourself. If you can't understand that key point, I don't want to sell you a gun.
And that's just it. I've gone, I'm no different than anyone else. I go into a store, I want to buy a gun, and it's something that I teach my beginner students right in the first part of class. Until you check the gun, it's always loaded. I don't care if the guy behind the counter pulls it out, checks it, and hands it to you. The minute that slide goes into battery, that gun's loaded. You check it. Lock it back, look for daylight, check the chamber, and then do what you gotta do. Now, I wanna see how a handgun is gonna point in my hand. So yes, I'm gonna be the guy standing at the counter going like this to see where those sights are coming up, how it's pointing in my hand. Do I like the way it feels? Is the bore axis too high for my grip? And a whole bunch of other stuff. But there have been times when the store's been so jammed up, I end up doing this at the floor, which really isn't an indication, but it's better than nothing, because there have been 2 or 3 people to the left, 3 or 4 people behind the counter, and 2 or 3 people to my right. So you just do not, at any point in time, ever let somebody end up on the business end of this.
Exactly. And another thing you might have noticed he was doing, when he was trying to figure out how the bore axis is, different things like that, trigger finger was straight out. He did not have that on the trigger at any point while he was feeling that.
He said feeling.
Oh, man. Okay. Now,
That's one other thing.
Yep.
Again, safety, always. You index that index finger on the frame. You keep it away from the trigger. Engage your brain before you engage the trigger. So you're in a shop. Typically, some shops, if you're going to dry fire the gun, some shops like you to ask if you're unfamiliar with them. Some shops, as they get more familiar with you, they won't care. Mm-hmm. Some shops don't care, but check. If you're going to dry fire the gun, I never, as a point of courtesy and respect for everyone else in the shop, I'm not going to put the gun out like this and dry fire it. If I go to dry fire it, I want to feel that trigger. I point it at the ground and then concentrate on what feeling I got on the end of my trigger finger, and I'll dry fire it pointed at the floor. After, even after they've checked it, handed it to me, I've checked it, done what I need to do with the sights, and then I'll do that a couple times just to make sure, and dry fire it pointed at the floor. So that way nobody ends up on the business end of it. Nobody sees me pulling a trigger with a gun extended or anything like that, because there are idiots everywhere. Granted, if someone doesn't know, you can't really call them an idiot if they don't know. But if they've been told they do know and they do it anyway, that's when they need a 2x4 across the back of the beam.
Yeah, and that's the big thing I was mentioning before. First, second time, we'll be a little courteous with you and say, please don't do that. It's a safety issue. And as far as the dry firing, if you're not familiar with what that is, for a first-time buyer, it's just getting a general feel for what the trigger's like. Different guns have different lengths of pull, which is how far the trigger has to travel before it actually releases the striker or releases the hammer to fire the gun.
And they have different trigger weights.
Mm-hmm. Yep, so there's going to be, and even just amongst that, there's also different levels of smoothness and crispness. Rather inexpensive gun, it might feel a little gritty. It might feel heavy and then get light. There's a lot of variation in triggers, and that's why people want to see what the trigger pull feels like in the gun before they actually buy it.
So, sorry about that break. The camera, when you're on the memory card, it breaks it into 20-minute segments, and then you lose about 15-20 seconds of me running my mouth till it starts the new file. So I try to stop it before we hit that 20-minute part. So that and somebody knocking on the door. Where were we?
We were just touching off on the different trigger pulls and dry firing in the shop. You know, just some basic etiquettes for the shop. And, you know, it's not necessary, but it is appreciated. Every time you want to see something, just be polite about it. Say please. Say thank you. courtesy like that goes a long way, not just in gun shops, but anywhere.
Anywhere. Remember, an armed society is a polite society.
And unlike any other shops, gun shops, if you're not being safe or not being belligerent in any way, you'll be asked to leave. This isn't Radio Shack.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I've seen it happen in other shops where somebody's getting mouthy with the salesman, and customers, regulars, start clearing concealing garments and stepping off to the side and basically just getting ready to do whatever the shop needs them to do. It has gotten to that point. I've seen it. I was at a shop down on the west, about 20 miles outside of Philadelphia. I'm not going to go into the name of the place, but there was a customer in there who was being rather ignorant with somebody behind the counter. I don't know what it was about, but from judging by the reactions of the other customers, they were clearing lines of fire. So, and they asked the guy to leave twice. Customers started moving to different. Now, I'm not saying that happens all the time, but you are in a store that sells firearms. There are going to be people in that store with concealed carry permits who are ready, willing, and able, well, we can hope able, but ready and willing to defend themselves if necessary. So
yeah, they take protecting themselves very seriously. And the one thing you'll find that people don't often mention about concealed carriers is that they want to save anybody they can. They don't want to see anybody get hurt. There was an instance in the shop this one time where there was actually a pretty big divider between a customer and another customer who was in the shop who was actually a police officer. The first customer actually walked in, went up to the counter, and jokingly goes, "Stick 'em up," with his bare hand, just goofing around, being stupid. But you have a police officer who can't hear this, who can't see this, hearing what's going on.
Can't see an empty hand.
And he's reaching for his firearm and wondering what's going down here.
Yeah, not a good place for jokes. Some jokes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, like, if you want to tell Obama jokes in a gun shop, I'm pretty sure you're going to get rave reviews.
Yeah, it'll be a receptive audience.
Yes, it would be a receptive audience. Or, like, called Dianne Feinstein a pig with lipstick, that would probably go over pretty big. Well, most pigs would be insulted by that. But
Yeah, I like bacon. Don't do that.
yeah, sorry. Didn't mean to insult bacon. But, yeah, not a good thing to do. Actually, that's not a good thing to do in any store. So those are some of the tips for first-time buyers. Have an idea of what you want. Be honest with the person behind the counter. If you want a gun that you're going to carry and conceal,
We're the people to talk to. We're not going to judge you. That's our livelihood. That's
Oh.
our business.
well, yeah, they're going to judge you. They're going to be like, cool! Because it means money for them. Their store keeps going. They keep working. You get something to protect yourself with. It's a win-win.
That's your constitutional right.
Absolutely. Well, actually, God-given right, protected by the Constitution. Let's be...
Touche.
Thank you. But yeah, nobody's going to judge you in a gun shop. At least, not if some, like, 4'10" woman comes in and says, "I want a 44 Magnum with a 235-foot-long barrel." Okay, that's going to make every head in the shop go, huh? Did she just ask, what? But seriously, I kid.
Now, he, was joking in that point, but I have had some instances where I've had customers who were working with guns that I felt wasn't really a good idea for them. I had an older gentleman, maybe about 65, 70-ish, who kind of shook a good bit and looked like he had some weakness in his hands going on. You got to be honest with yourself about what you can handle, and while I'm not saying take the employee's word as gospel, but generally try to listen to their advice. He was looking at one of the little Taurus single stack, the 40. It's a Taurus Model 740, and he could barely work the slide back. And it's a tiny little single stack gun made of polymer. The felt recoil on that is going to be tremendous.
40's a snappy round to begin with.
I over and over and over expressed my concerns to him. he was there with his buddy. His buddy kept saying, "Oh, that's going to be great, 40 calibers, blah blah blah, all these things." 2 weeks later, he brought the gun back. You know, I tried my best to tell him I don't think this is the right gun for you, but he ended up having to trade it in. We worked the best we could with him, so he didn't lose a great deal of money, but he did take a hit. And he ended up going with the gun I was originally recommending him to him in the first place. So, you know, be a little honest with yourself about what you think you can handle. Oh, and that is actually another thing I was thinking of. If you have friends, or even one friend, that is into guns, see if they'll take you to the range.
Yeah.
Getting out there, most guys who are gun guys will have 10, 15, 473 guns. So they'll generally have a few different options you can try. You can try a little Target 22 just to practice with. You can try a single stack 9mm. Work your way up. Maybe you'll be a dead-on natural shot with a 45 1911, and that, hey, rock on. You're not going to know these things as a first-time shooter, but if you get a chance to go out and try some things before you buy it, great. Or if you can find a shop that actually has a range where you can rent the guns,
even better.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's one of the things I do. It's not an NRA class, but I do kind of like an intro to handguns class, where I'll pack up everything from a Ruger 22 up to and including a Smith & Wesson 44 mag with a 2-inch ported barrel, and say, all right, we're going to start here, and then we're going to work our way up at your pace, at the student's pace. Go over the basics of safety, go over the basics of safety, and when we're done with that, we'll go over the basics of safety, because yes, it's that important that I said it 3 times. And then we'll go out to the range, I'll put a gun in their hand, show them how to load it, show them how it works, then go over the basics of safety again, and then let them shoot the 22. And then a 380, and then a 38, and then a 9mm, and then maybe a 357 with 38 loads in it, and then a 40 or a 10mm, and just let them work their way up as long as they're comfortable. I mean, the other week, Greg's mom, my buddy from work, his mom went all the way up to my 10mm, and she was just like, "Oh, I really like that." I'm like, yeah, it's $38 for 25 rounds for carry ammo. Well, maybe I'll think about something different. And then she set it down.
Yeah, that's another good point.
That's another thing. If you can't afford to shoot it,
yeah,
you really don't want to buy it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, practicing with 9mm, you can do that a lot. Generally, a box of 50 will run you $12, $13 or so. If you wanted to buy a 357 SIG, a 10mm, 44 mag, you're going to spend a lot of money practicing because the ammo is a lot more expensive, and some of them, they're quite difficult to find.
Yeah.
45 gap, 357 SIG.
Well, I was just at a store today picking up some reloading supplies, and they had 180 grain jacketed hollow points, nothing special, the PMC bronze,
yeah,
and 10mm, $28.99 for 25 rounds.
Yep, that's over $1 a round. Whereas with the 9mm, 30, 35 cents or so.
Well, I just put it in perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I just bought a couple of boxes of American Eagle, you know, down here the other week. They were $14.99 for a box of 50. So you got $14.99 for a box of 147 grain full metal jackets in 9mm, or $30 for 25, basically till you're done with taxes, 6% here in Pennsylvania, $28.99. So you might as well just say $29 plus tax. There's your $30 right there, for 25 rounds of 180 grain jacketed hollow points in 10mm. And there's a big difference between 9mm and 10mm. I'm comfortable carrying something that big. I reload, so it doesn't cost me as much to shoot. But for people who don't reload, who are just buying their first handgun, that's a whole different story. They got to buy stuff off the shelf until they can accumulate, you know, a brass stash like that. And that's just my 9mm brass. There's
From
another
yesterday.
Nah, it's the last 2 days. You know, I have tubs like that for 40 Smith & Wesson, 10 millimeter, 45, 38, 357, 44 Magnum, 223, you know, with thousands of rounds of brass in them. That's probably 3,000 or 4,000 9mm cases right there that are all prepped and ready to be reloaded. That means they've been cleaned, resized, and deprimed. So that's another thing. Till you build a brass stash and then buy all the equipment for reloading, you know, that's another $500-600 down the road on top of the cost of the gun, plus a workspace, place to set it up, all the equipment that goes with it, powder measure, priming tool, dyes, brass, primers, powder, bullet heads, scales, all that good stuff.
Yeah, reloading is about step 132. We're taking it through step 1 through 5 here, so
Yeah.
it's a big way down the road there.
So yeah, it's a pretty long road to hoe. So that's pretty much it on the basics of, you know, first time buyer, do's, don'ts, tips, tricks, bewares.
And don't feel that you have to buy a gun that day. No matter what, they're there to serve you. If you spend 45 minutes with a customer, I completely understand that they might not be ready to make a decision that day because, like I said, it's not returnable. It's a new thing to them. That's fine.
Well, yeah, and it's a chunk of change.
Yeah.
Glock 29 10mm, $575. That's a chunk of change. There's 4 other Glocks in my gun safe that were purchased brand new. Guess what? They're all around the same price. So there's $2,000, $2,500 basically, worth of handguns. And, you know, that's a big chunk of change for anyone, unless you're making, you know, $700,000-800,000 a year and you got no money worries or anything like that.
In which case, just buy one of everything, you'll be happy.
And if you're not, the guy behind the counter will be.
Yep.
But yeah, it is a commitment. It is a commitment financially, and it is a commitment to the responsibility of safe gun ownership, safe gun handling. It is a commitment to learn the basics.
And knowing what is legal in your state. We can't really go into that
Yeah.
here because we're talking about Pennsylvania. We're familiar with those laws. 50 different states, 50 different sets of laws, entirely unique to that state.
Right, like I have guns that if you took across the border into New Jersey, those scumbags would probably shoot you on sight.
I can carry a gun in Pennsylvania with a permit concealed or out on my hip, open carry,
With
without
no permit.
any permit.
Right.
If I have that permit and I go to New Jersey,
You're a
guess
felon.
what? You're a felon. Yeah, you may have heard of the case of Shaneen Allen, who actually went in New Jersey, was ignorant of the laws, going into a different state with it. She ended up getting arrested, losing her job, all because she was actually honest with the police officer. She didn't know she was doing anything wrong, and she got pulled over.
The cop asked her if she had a gun in a car. She said, yeah, it's right here.
Yep,
Here's my permit. He said, this is a Pennsylvania permit. Put your hands above your head.
Yep, so not just your own state. You got to be aware if you live near a border or you're going to be traveling and you want to take your firearm with you. Make sure
What
you
you can
know
do and what you
where you're
can't do.
going. What you can do and what you can't do.
So it is a big commitment to purchase your first firearm. It is a big commitment, like I said, financially, responsibility-wise, educationally. There's a lot of stuff that goes along with being a responsible gun owner. And in my case, a responsible instructor. In his case, a responsible instructor, gun owner, salesperson, you know, the whole 9 yards. And that's, you know, it's a lot to think about, and it's a lot to weigh on your mind. And before you plunk down those $500, $600, $700, $800 for your first firearm, you want to make sure you're comfortable with it. You want to make sure you can handle it. You want to make sure you've got all the knowledge you need to make an informed decision, and then you move on from there, which is go to the range and start shooting. Or I work very closely with the shop here in town. They have a stack of my business cards, and they get somebody who comes in and buys their first gun or asks about NRA classes or firearms instructors. They go, well, as a matter of fact, here, talk to this guy.
Yep. Ask as many questions as you want, because generally when you're getting into something new, you don't know what you don't know. If you're looking for training, you can't find anybody in the phone book or online, stop by your local shop, say, hey, I'm looking for training. We'll send you to somebody like this guy who will put you right.
And that's pretty much it. So, as always, if you have any questions or comments, please write down there in the comments section. If you have any ideas for a future Basement Gun Shop episode, again, down there in the comments. Just remember, if you want a gun reviewed, I got to go out and buy that thing, so it's coming out of my pocket. So,
Which just gives them a reason.
well, yeah, basically, it just gives me a reason to go buy something else, and then I come home and Dawn just goes, ugh. But other than that, as always, thank you for watching the Basement Gun Shop. I appreciate it. And until next time, stay safe.
Take the time to subscribe to the Basement Gun Shop.
Yeah, like the channel, subscribe, even better. Look at that. I'm losing it on my own stuff. But until next time, stay safe and keep shooting.
Take care, guys.
And we're out.